The night was heavy and the store carried a silence that was not peaceful but unsettling, the kind that pressed down on the chest and made every sound sharper. The hum of the lights overhead sounded louder than it should. The squeak of shoes against polished tiles echoed like whispers. The man in the dark coat walked slowly, his presence unnoticed, his eyes sharp and restless. He was not here tonight as the wealthy boss or the figure everyone respected during daylight hours. Tonight he had stripped himself of title and walked through the doors as a shadow, blending in as one of them, just another late visitor to his own empire. He wanted truth, raw and unfiltered, and this was the only way to find it. His steps carried him past aisles stacked neatly with goods, past rows of glowing refrigerators, past cleaning carts parked against the wall, and then he heard it, faint, soft, cracked, like something breaking, not metal, not wood, not machinery, but a human sound, the sound of grief. He stopped, his breath caught his head, turning toward the noise. A low sob carried from the back near the storage area. His heartbeat quickened, not from fear but recognition. He knew pain when he heard it. He had lived it once, long ago. He followed the sound until his eyes fell upon the figure crouched on the floor near the cleaning cart, a man in a faded uniform, shoulders shaking, head in hands, tears slipping freely onto the tile. The mop leaned helplessly against the wall, as if even it carried the weight of sorrow. The undercover CEO froze, watching unseen for a moment, his chest tightening. The janitor was not just tired, he was unraveling. The floor creaked under his step, and the janitor's head shot up, startled, his eyes red and wet, his face lined with exhaustion and years of wear. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his tears with his sleeve. "I am sorry, sir. Forgive me. I was just taking a moment. I will get back to work at once." The undercover man raised a hand slowly. "No need for that. I did not mean to startle you. I was just passing through, but tell me what is wrong. You are in pain." The janitor shook his head, his voice breaking. "It is nothing, sir. Just tired. Work is long. Nights are harder. That is all. Please do not worry about me." But the disguised CEO had built his life on studying people, on reading expressions and words, on seeing through lies, and he knew this was not nothing. This was the cry of a man breaking at the seams. He stepped closer, his tone soft, almost pleading. "It does not look like nothing, you can tell me. I am just another man here tonight. Perhaps it will ease your heart." The janitor looked down, his fingers trembling as they gripped the mop handle. Finally he let out a long shaking breath. "My daughter, she is sick. The doctors said she needs surgery, but the cost is far beyond me. I worked here for 12 years, saved what little I could, even sold my belongings, but it is still not enough. She cries every night, and I cannot ease her pain." The words cut deep into the heart of the undercover boss. His throat tightened. He had come here expecting to find laziness, dishonesty, maybe even corruption among workers. Instead, he had found raw tragedy. "How old is she?" he asked, his voice lower now, heavy with weight. The janitor whispered, "Her name is Lily. She used to draw pictures for me. Every evening she used to run through the house laughing. Now she cannot even stand without wincing in pain. I tried everything, but I failed." The man in the coat closed his eyes for a moment. The image of a little girl suffering flashed before him, and with it came memories of his own childhood, memories of his mother weeping quietly when she thought he was asleep, memories of hunger, of fear, of nights when hope seemed like a stranger. He had sworn that no child of his would ever know that pain, and yet here was a man who had given 12 years of service, and still his child lay in agony. The undercover CEO wanted to shout, wanted to tear away the mask and promise the world to this father, but he held himself still. Not yet, not here. He needed to understand the full truth. He needed to see how deep the cracks ran through his empire. He bent down until his eyes met the janitor's and said quietly, "You are not alone. Sometimes help comes from where we least expect. Do not give up. Not yet." The janitor's eyes filled with more tears. He nodded, though his shoulders slumped. "Thank you, kind sir, but words cannot pay for medicine, and kindness does not cure sickness. Still, I must work. I must try until my body can do no more. I have no other choice." The undercover CEO stood, his fists clenched, his chest burning with fury, not at the man before him, but at the silent cruelty of the system, at himself for not knowing, at the empire he had built on loyalty and labor, only to leave loyal men broken and unseen. He turned and walked away slowly through the aisles. The shelves of luxury mocking him, goods lined up perfectly under bright lights, while a child's life faded in the dark. The night air outside hit him cold, sharp like truth itself. He stopped under the street lamps, his breath misting, his eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. How many more, he whispered to himself, how many more of my people suffer unseen? Hidden behind uniforms and forced smiles, how many tears fall into mops and dustpans, while I sit in glass towers, believing all is welfare. Vow formed in his chest, heavy like iron. He would uncover every secret, no matter how painful. He would peel back the surface of his empire until he knew the truth, because tonight he had seen more than one man's sorrow. He had seen the failure of a world he believed he had mastered. The undercover CEO clenched his jaw, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with purpose. He had entered tonight, seeking loyalty. He had found instead a wound so deep it would test not only his empire but his own soul. Land. He knew this was only the beginning, because the more he dug, the more secrets he would find, and somewhere in those secrets lay a truth so heavy it might break him. Morning light spilled into the office towers of the city, but he sat at his desk restless, his disguise from last night still clinging to his mind. Like a shadow, the image of the janitor, broken and crying, refused to fade. He tried to bury himself in reports, charts, figures, the endless language of business, but none of it drowned out the sound of that man's voice. 12 years of service and a daughter dying without hope. He leaned back in his chair, staring out across the skyline. Every shining building felt hollow, every glowing sign of success mocked him. He had thought himself a builder of greatness, yet the foundation beneath was cracked, bleeding. He had seen it with his own eyes. He made a decision, swift and cold. He would not wait for filtered reports or polished speeches from managers. He would move through the company unseen. He would tear away the curtain himself. Only then could he know the truth. Only then could he act. That evening he dressed down again. No fine suits, no tie, only plain clothes that made him look like any other man. He walked through the side entrance of another branch of his empire. Eyes sharp, every corner, every whisper captured. Nothing escaped him. At first all looked normal, shelves, stocked, workers, moving, customers served, but then his trained eye noticed details, small yet telling. A cashier whose smile looked forced, hands trembling as she counted change, a stockboy who moved with a limp, ignored by supervisors, a delivery driver whose eyes darted nervously as though fearing something unseen. He followed the driver outside to the loading dock and caught the sharp exchange between him and a manager, the words harsh and cruel, the manager's voice cut like a knife. "You are late again. If this happens once more, I will see to it you are replaced." The driver lowered his head, his voice small. "My mother is in the hospital, sir. I had to stay longer this morning. I promise it will not happen again." The manager scoffed. "Your excuses mean nothing. This company cannot wait for your personal drama. Now unload faster before I dock your pather." Undercover CEO felt anger burn in his chest, his fists clenched at his side, but he forced himself to remain silent, hidden. He had to see more. He wandered deeper into the building, finding himself near the break room. The door cracked open. Inside, two supervisors spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with greed and disdain. "Cut overtime again," one sneered, laughing at the thought. "These fools will still come crawling. They have no choice, and the money we save goes straight into the pockets upstairs." The other nodded, smirking. "They never ask questions, too afraid of losing the little they have." The undercover man's stomach twisted. The betrayal cut deep, not only against the workers, but against everything he had sworn his company would stand for. He wanted to burst through the door, expose them, fire them on the spot. But he held back because this was only one branch, only one glimpse. The sickness might be far larger. Night fell, and he returned home to his empty penthouse, the silence pressing harder than ever. He poured himself a glass of water, but it tasted bitter. His wealth, his power, felt meaningless tonight, because what good was it if the men and women who carried him there cried unseen? The next day he continued his secret rounds, each location revealing more cracks, some subtle, some glaring. He saw workers, bullied schedules, twisted families suffering behind closed doors, and above it all, managers boasting in arrogance, their cruelty disguised as efficiency. But the worst came when he returned again to the first store, the place where the janitor wept. In the shadows he wanted to see the man again, wanted to know more, perhaps even reveal himself. But fate moved faster. He found the janitor on his knees, scrubbing the floor though. His face looked pale, and his movements slow. He asked softly, "Are you all right, friend?" The janitor forced a faint smile, though his eyes betrayed pain. "I am fine, sir, only tired." But his body trembled. The mop slipped from his hand, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping, clutching his chest. The undercover CEO dropped to his knees, lifting the man's head, panic surging through him. "Someone help," he shouted, though his voice cracked with urgency. "Call an ambulance." Workers rushed forward, the room filled with chaos. The janitor struggled to speak, his breath shallow. "Please, sir, do not waste your time on me. My daughter, she needs help, not me. Promise me, if you can promise me, you will look after her." His words hit like thunder. The undercover man's throat closed. He wanted to reveal everything, to shout, "I am the one who can save her. I am the one with power." But before he could speak, paramedics rushed in, lifting the janitor onto a stretcher, carrying him away, the room falling silent in the wake of despair. The CEO stood there, shaking, torn between the need to act and the weight of secrecy. The truth had become unbearable. The empire he built was not strength, but suffering hidden under bright lights and glossy numbers. And now, a loyal man might die because of Ith stepped outside into the cool night air, his chest heaving with anger and guilt. He could no longer deny what he had seen, no longer pretend all was well. He had come undercover seeking loyalty, but he had found betrayal, corruption, and hidden tears. His phone buzzed, a message from one of his top executives, requesting a meeting tomorrow, urgent matters about profits. But for the first time, he felt disgust instead of pride. The very people he trusted might be the ones bleeding his workers dry. He clenched his jaw, the vow from last night burning stronger. He would tear open every secret, no matter how deep, no matter who it crushed. He would not rest until he uncovered the full truth, until justice was done. And as he walked into the darkness of the street, he knew one thing with certainty: the deeper he dug, the more dangerous this path would become, because hidden beneath the sorrow of one janitor lay a web of greed, betrayal, and secrets that could destroy not only his empire, but his own heart. Night after the janitor was taken away refused to leave his mind. The undercover CEO lay awake, staring at the ceiling as if answers might appear in the cracks of the plaster. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the trembling man whispering about his daughter, and every time he tried to breathe, the sound of that plea crushed him deeper. By morning, he was already on the move. He entered his headquarters, not as the polished figure of power, but as a silent storm hidden inside his chest. The walls of glass and steel that once filled him with pride now looked like cages, cold and unfeeling. The smiles of executives in the lobby looked plastic, painted on faces that knew only numbers and profits. He called for a meeting, but this time he did not announce himself in the usual way. No security, no warning, only a quiet appearance in the boardroom. His sudden arrival drew startled looks. Whispers rushed through the room like wind, but he waved them down. "Sit," he commanded, his tone calm yet heavy. The executives shuffled into their chairs, their tablets and folders clutched tight like shields. One of them, the chief financial officer, leaned forward with a rehearsed smile. "Sir, we were just about to send you the quarterly report. Profits are at an all-time high." Profits, he repeated slowly, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "Tell me, do these profits come from loyalty and efficiency, or from bleeding my workers dry?" The room went still. Silence, heavy enough to choke one of the vice presidents, cleared his throat. "Sir, the workers are treated fairly. We have systems in place." He raised his hand sharply enough to silence them. "I have seen with my own eyes workers crushed under schedules, managers mocking the suffering over time, cut pay threatened, families starving, children dying while you sit here in comfort." Gasps rippled around the table, though some tried to hide their smirks. Others exchanged nervous glances. The CFO shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I assure you, any isolated issues will be addressed. But the company cannot function without strict control." "Strict control," he snapped. "Strict cruelty. Perhaps 12 years. A man served this company and his daughter is dying without help. And when he collapses on the floor, he believes no one in this company will save her." The silence that followed was heavier than before. The executives avoided his gaze, shifting in their seats. Like guilty children, he leaned across the table, his voice low but fierce. "I built this empire on the promise of dignity and respect for every worker, but somewhere along the way that promise was poisoned. I want to know who is responsible. I want to know how deep this rot runs, and I will find out." His words carried like thunder, but behind their eyes he saw fear, and more than fear, he saw calculation, the look of men hiding something. The meeting ended with mumbled agreements, promises to investigate, but he knew better. He had read enough faces to know some of them were lying. They were too calm, too quick to reassure, which only meant the truth was darker than they dared admit. That evening he shed his title once more, and slipped back into plain clothes. He returned to the hospital where the janitor had been taken. The hall smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Families huddled on benches. Doctors rushed past with weary eyes. He asked at the desk for the man by name and was led to a small room where the janitor lay pale and weak, tubes running from his arm. The undercover CEO stood quietly at the bedside watching the rise and fall of his chest. The man stirred his eyes, opening faintly when he saw the figure beside him. He tried to sit, but the undercover man pressed him gently back to rest. "Save your strength," he whispered. "I am only here to see youth." Janitor smiled faintly, though his eyes still carried shadows. "You are kind, but I know kindness cannot change what is coming. The doctors say my heart is weak too weak. For years of labor, I pushed myself too far. My only fear is leaving Lily alone. She has no one else." The words stabbed like knives. The undercover CEO felt his throat tighten. He wanted to reveal the truth, to say, "I am your boss, I have power to help," but he forced the words down. Not yet, not until he uncovered the whole truth. If he acted too soon, the vipers in his own company would bury their tracks. He placed a hand on the janitor's shoulder and said quietly, "You will not leave her alone. Someone will watch over her, even if it costs everything." Tears welled in the janitor's eyes. He squeezed the stranger's hand. "Thank you," he whispered before drifting back into exhausted sleep. The undercover CEO left the hospital carrying a storm inside him. He walked through the city streets until night wrapped around him, neon lights glowing like lies in the distance, his thoughts burning. The next day, he demanded access to the deepest financial records, but not through the executives, through his own private team, loyal only to him. What they uncovered made his blood run cold. Entire sums diverted from employee welfare funds, redirected into private accounts, luxury bonuses hidden under teed language, benefits promised but never delivered. The center of it stood the CFO, the very man who had smiled in his face while workers cried. In silence, betrayal stung sharper than fire. He did not confront him, yet he waited, choosing instead to watch quietly. He sent trusted aides undercover into other branches. What returned to him was worse stories of harassment, threats, wages cut, families destroyed, all while managers boasted of loyalty to the higher officers. Every night, he walked alone, unable to sleep, the voices of his workers echoing in his head, the image of the janitor begging for his daughter haunting him, until dawn. Finally, the storm inside could no longer be contained. He summoned the CFO to a private meeting. The man arrived polished, confident, unaware of the trap. "Waiting. You built your fortune on lies," the undercover CEO said, his voice low, as he spread the evidence across the desk. "Welfare funds, stolen bonuses, hidden workers crushed to feed your greed." The CFO's face twitched, but he tried to recover quickly. "Sir, you do not understand. These adjustments were necessary to maintain stability. Without them, profits would fall." "Stability," he roared. "Stability at the cost of lives, at the cost of children dying. You sit here fat with wealth, while men like that janitor bleed their souls out for scraps." For a moment, silence filled the office. Then the CFO leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "Sir, you are too sentimental. If you interfere, you will ruin everything. This is how the world works, and if you try to change it, you will lose more than money." The words struck like venom, and in that instant, the undercover CEO saw it clearly. This was no mere greed. This was rot eating through the core of his empire, and if he did not cut it out, it would destroy everything he stood for. He dismissed the man with a cold glare, but his hands shook with rage. As the door closed behind him, he knew the fight ahead would not be simple, because corruption never died quietly. It fought, it clawed, and it would not hesitate to strike back. That night, as he sat alone in his office, the city stretching endless outside his window, he felt the weight of betrayal pressing down like chains, but beneath it rose something stronger, determination. He whispered to himself a vow that carried the weight of thunder. "I will save them all, even if it breaks me." And with that vow, the war inside his empire truly began. The night after the confrontation weighed heavy on him. He could not sleep. The city lights stretched across the horizon like false stars, but they offered no peace. He had seen the truth in the CFO's eyes, arrogance that came not from ignorance, but from a man certain of his power, certain that greed was stronger than compassion. He walked through his penthouse restless, the silence echoing his own thoughts. His empire was vast, but what was it worth if built on bones of the weak? He had believed himself master of it all, yet in truth, shadows had crept through the foundation long before he noticed, and now they ruled behind his back. By dawn he made his choice. The war could not wait. He summoned a small circle of the most loyal people, those who had proven themselves over years, people whose loyalty was not to profit but to principle. He gathered them in a private chamber. No cameras, no assistance, no record, only trust. He laid the evidence before them, the stolen funds, the twisted schedules, the silent suffering of the workers. Their faces turned pale, anger rising in their eyes. One by one they spoke, swearing, loyalty, swearing, to cleanse the company of the rot, no matter the cost. But even as they vowed, he knew this would not remain hidden long. The corrupt would sense the storm already. The CFO had looked him in the eye and warned him change would destroy everything. And men who speak with such certainty do not wait, they strike first. The next day whispers began. He noticed executives avoiding his gaze, conversations that ceased the moment he entered, memos that vanished before he could see them. The air in his own headquarters grew colder, filled with suspicion. He could feel eyes on him everywhere. And then came the blow, swift and precise. An article leaked to the press, rumors of financial instability, whispers that the CEO had lost his grip, accusations of reckless spending and betrayal from within the empire. Stock prices dipped overnight. Panic spread. Investors demanded answers, and the very workers he sought to protect feared collapse. He stood before cameras, answering questions, his voice steady, though his chest burned with fury. Behind those rumors lay the hand of the CFO and his allies, trying to crush him before he could crush them. When the conference ended, he returned to his office and found a message waiting, a plain envelope left on his desk. Inside only a single line, written in sharp ink: "Stop digging or your empire falls." He held the note in his hand, his jaw tight, his heart pounding. The threat was real, and it was not only business they were willing to destroy. They would burn everything, including innocent lives, to protect their greed. He leaned against the window, staring at the city below, and whispered to himself, "Let them come. They do not know who I am. I built this empire from nothing, and I will burn it down before I let them steal it from the souls who built it with me." That night he returned again to the hospital where the janitor lay. The man looked weaker, his breaths shallow, his eyes half closed. The undercover CEO sat beside him, quietly watching the fragile rise and fall of his chest. When the janitor stirred, he whispered, "Have you seen her, my Lilius?" The undercover man replied, "I will see her safe no matter what happens." The janitor gripped his hand with surprising strength, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Promise me, do not let them hurt her. Promise me she will not suffer because of men like them." "My promise," he said, his voice trembling more than he wished. The janitor released his hand, slowly, his eyes drifting shut again, the machines beside him humming softly, but the words etched themselves into the undercover CEO. Like fire, he had made many vows in his life, to investors, to partners, to the world, but none carried the weight of this one. Next morning he struck back. He ordered secret audits across branches, bypassing corrupt executives, sending his loyal circle into the field under his direct command. What they returned with was darker than expected: records of bribes, intimidation, entire chains of managers forcing workers to pay out of their own pockets to keep jobs, threats to families if they dared speak out, a network of cruelty thriving under the surface of his empire. His fury burned hotter than ever, but he kept his face calm outwardly, playing the role of a leader seeking stability, while inside he planned his counterstrike. The corrupt fought harder every step. Rumors spread further, allies pulled away, deals collapsed, and the CFO walked boldly through the halls, as though untouchable, whispering poison into ears, turning more people against the man who built it. Or one evening as he left his office, a black car followed him through the streets, too close to deliberate when he turned corners. It turned when he slowed. It slowed. Finally he pulled into a quiet alley and stepped out, facing the vehicle. The doors opened, and two men stepped out, faces cold, voices low. "You are making dangerous choices, sir. Best to walk away before something happens." He stared at them, unflinching, his voice steady. "Tell your master I do not bend. Tell him the more he pushes, the more he seals his own fate." The men exchanged glances, then returned to their car, vanishing into the night. But the message was clear. This was no longer business. This was war, and lives were on the line. He returned home, his fists tight, his chest heavy, but instead of fear he felt clarity. He knew now the corrupt would not surrender. They would fight until one side was destroyed, and he had no choice but to see it through, for the janitor, for Lily, for every worker whose tears had been hidden too long. He sat in the darkness, whispering to himself, "I will not stop. I will not break." Outside the city glowed, but inside his heart thunder prepared for the storm to come. The city woke restless with rumors about his empire. Voices on the streets spoke of collapse, investors whispered of betrayal, and in the towers of power enemies sharpened their knives. Yet the undercover CEO walked through the storm with fire in his chest, the weight of the janitor's plea and the The image of Lily haunted him every step and gave him strength. He gathered his loyal circle once again in secrecy, their faces tense, but their eyes unwavering, the evidence stacked before them. Now filled entire tables, reports, testimonies, hidden documents, smuggled from locked offices. It was enough to expose the network of corruption, but also dangerous enough to spark ruin if mishandled. We have reached the edge, he told them, his voice low and steady. One step forward, and there is no turning back. The men who betrayed us will not go quietly. They will fight to protect their greed, and they will try to destroy me and anyone who stands beside me. But if we hold this truth back, then we are no better than them. One of his most trusted advisors leaned forward, her voice calm but heavy. If you expose this, you must be ready to lose everything. Reputation, wealth, even safety. Are you willing? He looked at the faces around him, the memory of the janitor, pale and weak, the thought of Lily crying in her bed, and the countless unseen workers carrying invisible chains. His answer rose without hesitation. Yes, if I lose everything, so be it, but I will not lose my soul. They nodded solemnly, and together began preparing for the strike. Days passed, filled with shadow and whispers. The CFO and his allies moved openly, spreading poison in every corridor. Executives turned their backs. Investors demanded resignation. The pressure grew unbearable, but inside the undercover CEO, only steel remained. One night, he returned again to the hospital, slipping past nurses, until he reached the room of the janitor. The man looked weaker than ever, his skin pale, his breathing shallow, yet his eyes lit up faintly when he saw the figure beside him. You came again, he whispered barely audibly. Always, the undercover CEO replied softly. Lily will be safe. I promised you that. The janitor tried to smile, though his lips trembled. I believe you, sir, even though I never knew your name. Something in me says you are not just a stranger. The undercover man's throat tightened, his secret pressed against his chest, but he held it back. Not yet, not until the time was right. He only gripped the man's hand and whispered, rest now. Soon she will know she is not alone. The janitor's eyes closed slowly, his breathing soft but uncertain. The undercover CEO remained at his side for hours, silently vowing again and again, until dawn forced him away there. Next morning he struck the first blow. His loyal circle leaked fragments of evidence. 2 trusted journalists, not the full truth, but pieces enough to stir questions. Reports of stolen funds, accounts that did not add up, testimonies of workers silenced by fear. The media caught the scent like wolves. The story spread fast, and the arrogance faltered for the first time, but retaliation came swift, brutal. Entire campaigns launched to discredit him, anonymous letters claiming he had lost his mind, false accusations painted across headlines, attempts to drag his name into the mud. Yet he stood unbroken, facing cameras with calm fury. We will uncover the truth, he told the world, and his eyes carried such fire that even his enemies trembled behind closed doors. The CFO cornered him, his voice dripping with venom. Stop this madness. You are tearing down everything you built. Step aside before you bring ruin. The undercover CEO met his glare. Unflinching. Ruin built on lies deserves to fall, he replied, his voice quiet but sharp as steel. The CFO's mask cracked, rage flashing in his eyes. You think you can fight me? You think loyalty will save you? You will regret this. The undercover CEO leaned close, his words like thunder. It is not loyalty that will save me, it is truth, and truth is something you cannot bury forever. The battle raged through every corridor of the empire. Meetings turned into battlefields, alliances, shattered threats arrived like storms, but through it all, the undercover man pressed forward. Piece by piece he revealed the corruption to the world, each revelation striking like lightning, and with each strike, the workers began to whisper hope again. One evening, as he left the office under heavy guard, his phone buzzed, a message from the hospital, urgent. He rushed, their heart pounding, only to find Lily in the waiting room, her small frame curled into a chair, tears streaking her face. The nurse whispered her father had taken a turn for the worse. He knelt before her, his disguise forgotten in that moment, and gently wiped her tears. Do not be afraid, he said. Your father loves you more than anything, and he wanted me to tell you that no matter what happens, you are not alone. She looked at him through red, swollen eyes. Who are you? Why do you care? He hesitated. Then, for the first time, the truth slipped free. I am the man who built this company, the man your father worked for all these years, and I promise you, I will fight for you as if you were my own. Her eyes widened, in shock, but something in her gaze softened, as though she believed him in that moment. He made a vow that burned deeper than any before. He would not let her life be crushed by the greed of men in suits. When he left the hospital that night, he was no longer just a CEO or a man seeking justice. He was a father in spirit, fighting for a child who was not his own, and that gave him strength beyond fear. The next morning he called for the largest meeting in the history of his company. Workers from every branch summoned, executives, investors, the media, all gathered in the grand hall. Whispers and tension filled the air. The CFO sat smug at the front, certain of his power, certain he had already won. But when the undercover CEO walked onto the stage, the hall fell silent. He looked across the sea of faces and spoke with fire. I built this empire on trust, but that trust was broken, not by the workers who gave their sweat and tears, but by those who sit in luxury while stealing from them. Gasps filled the air as he raised documents and testimonies exposing every betrayal, the stolen funds, the threats, the cruelty. Names spilled into the air like poison dragged into light, and at the center stood the CFO. The man tried to laugh, tried to twist words, but the evidence was undeniable. The crowd turned, anger rising, shouts echoing like thunder. The hall shook with the weight of truth, revealed for the first time. The CFO looked afraid, his mask stripped, his power slipping through his fingers. As the workers he had crushed rose with fury, the undercover CEO looked him in the eye and said coldly, "This is the end for you." And for every shadow that fed on their suffering, the hall erupted. Chaos, shouts, tears, hope. The storm had broken, but the war was not yet finished, because, even as the CFO was dragged away in disgrace, whispers remained of darker forces behind him, higher shadows, pulling strings, secrets still hidden, and the undercover CEO knew the final battle had yet to come. The grand hall still echoed with the chaos of the confrontation. The CFO dragged out in disgrace, the workers shouting their fury, the investors scrambling to save themselves. But the undercover CEO stood silent on the stage, his chest heavy, his mind burning. He knew this was not the end. This was only one head of the serpent cut off. But serpents do not die, so icily there were deeper shadows pulling strings, and if he stopped now, nothing would change. He spent the night in restless thought, walking the streets of the city like a ghost, while neon lights flickered above him. His empire stretched wide like a kingdom. But kingdoms fall not from outside but from within, and he could feel the poison still hidden in its veins. By dawn he returned to his headquarters, not in disguise but in full view, his face stern, his eyes burning with the weight of truth. Every corridor fell silent as he passed. Some bowed quickly, others turned away. Whispers rushed like wildfire. He entered the boardroom where the remaining executives sat, pale and uneasy. The seat of the CFO, still warm from betrayal, he placed his hands firmly on the table and spoke with a voice that carried thunder. "I know the truth does not end with him. The rot goes deeper than one man, and I will find it all. If any among you still hide behind greed, if any among you still steal from those who bleed for this company, step forward now, or I will tear down every wall until you are exposed." No one moved. Silence pressed heavy into the room. Eyes flickered but no voice dared answer, yet he saw the guilt plain as day. "So be it," he said quietly, "then I will uncover you myself." In the days that followed, he unleashed his loyal circle across every corner of the empire. Secret audits, hidden investigations, testimonies of workers brought to light. It was not only the CFO, there were more directors, managers, and even outside partners tangled in the web of betrayal. Millions stolen, lives ruined, and still they believed themselves untouchable. But truth, once revealed, spreads like fire. Workers began to speak. Voices once silent rose with strength. Stories of abuse and cruelty spilled into the open, and the world listened. The empire shook, but it did not crumble. Instead it began to transform from within. Even as victories came, a heavier shadow loomed, the janitor whose tears had begun. This storm lay weaker each day, his heart failing, his breaths shallow. The undercover CEO visited often, sitting by his bed, watching over Lily when she came clinging to her father's hand, her eyes wide with fear. One evening the janitor whispered, with the last strength in his voice, "I have nothing left but her. Please promise me once more she will be safe when I am gone." The undercover CEO gripped his hand, eyes burning with tears. "You have my word. She will never be alone. I will carry her future as if she were my own blood." A faint smile touched the janitor's lips, and with that he closed his eyes. His chest rose once more, then stilled. The machines fell silent and the room sank into grief. Lily clung to her father's hand, crying brokenly, and the undercover CEO felt a pain deeper than any loss of business or betrayal of partners. This was the pain of a man who gave everything and received nothing. in return except a promise carried by another. He held Lily close as she wept, whispering, "Gently, he is at peace now, and you are safe with me forever." From that day she became more than a symbol. She became his vow, made flesh. He moved forward with renewed fire. The empire was not only numbers, it was lives, children, families, dreams. It was her. The final strike came weeks later, when he revealed the full scale of corruption to the world. Press conferences filled with evidence, trials, launched names once powerful dragged into courts, fortunes seized, reputations shattered. The empire groaned under the weight of scandal, but it did not fall, because at its core the workers stood strong, and behind them stood him, not as a distant, untouchable figure, but as one who had walked their halls, seen their tears, and carried their grief. When the storm finally passed and the last of the corrupt were removed, he stood before his workers once more, this time not in grandeur but in humility. He looked across the crowd of faces, tired, hopeful, wounded, yet unbroken, and spoke. "I failed you once by trusting the wrong men, but I will not fail you again. This company is not mine, it is ours, built by your hands and your sacrifice. From this day forward, no voice will go unheard, no family will be left to suffer unseen. We rise together, or we do not rise at all." The hall erupted, not with fear or whispers, but with thunderous applause, tears streaming down faces, voices shouting in unity. Hope returned like a sunrise. That night he sat quietly in his office, Lily asleep on the couch beside him, her small form wrapped in a blanket. He watched her breathe, steady at last, safe and unafraid. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are, and in this loss I have found not just myself, but a family far greater than wealth." He looked out across the city lights, no longer false stars but promises waiting to be kept. The storm was over, the empire reborn, not of greed but of compassion, and though scars remained, they were reminders not of weakness but of survival. Their undercover CEO had entered his store seeking truth. He had found a janitor crying and a secret that broke his heart, but in the end that heartbreak became the seed of change that saved countless lives. And as he closed his eyes with Lily safe at his side, he knew the story was complete, not of power, not of riches, but of humanity itself. The end.